I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Griffin, would you lead us in the flag salute?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the record and town news and all persons requesting such notice. Mrs. Norian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. Needham? Mr. Griffin?
Here.
Mrs. Levy?
Here.
Mrs. Norian?
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Here.
Mrs. Walker? Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Darian? Mrs. Nichols?
Here. Open to the public for agenda items only. Please raise your digital hand if you're joining us on Zoom. Now 11. Okay, not seeing any, we'll move forward. So this is our last meeting of the calendar year. Our next meeting is the reorg. Do we know the date of that? Is it a Wednesday or is it a Monday because of the dates?
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, so we don't have to change anything? Okay. Robin, could you come up here? Just wanted to thank Robin for her service to our district the last 3 years, and we have a nice plaque for her. It says the Oradell Board of Education presented to Robin Rowland Levy in grateful recognition of your service and dedication to the children of Oradell, board member 2019 through 2021. Thought you might like that?
Thank you. I
We wanted to
appreciate that.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
You want to say anything?
I just want to thank the people of Oradell and my fellow board members. I've enjoyed serving and look forward to being involved on the other side of the table in the future.
I think you're still serving, aren't you, the sixth grade committee chair?
I am. Yes, sixth grade, which is a full-time job for everybody in the future.
Exactly.
You should know.
No, we wanted to just thank you and get you something small.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And now we'll turn it over to the superintendent for the district goal update.
Good evening. When we met in July, the one message I received loud and clear is that there was a feeling that we kept setting goals, but there was never any going back until May or June at the next retreat and saying whether or not we had achieved them. So we had decided at that time that November and March would be appropriate times for us to give district goal updates, which is the goal of today. And as I was thinking about it, as I was putting it together, I said, who actually thinks that this would be a great thing to do in December when there's so much going on? And I later realized that December being a time of celebration, we do already have a lot to celebrate in the progress we've made towards accomplishing our district goals. So just as a recap, you'll remember that we set 3 district goals for this year, the first being increasing quantitative student performance on the NJSLA, and in absence of the NJSLA, link it. Now, often that's the goal we set. We say everything else falls underneath it. But in so many ways, that's the product. And so what we also did this year is we set a goal about process. Because the truth is, you can improve achievement just because you have a different cohort of students sometimes. You could improve achievement on those test scores just because somebody had a good day. But what we want to know is that we have the routines systemically in our culture that help us to continue to use data effectively to provide differentiated academic and also social emotional instruction. So often people see SEL as this warm fuzzy land, but the fact is there is data also that can be used to target instruction there. And the third goal we set had to do with STEM and STEAM principles and really pushing ourselves to learn from the mistakes that so many make. And that is putting STEAM activities together that look really great on social media, but not making them about what it really is about, which is developing critical reasoning and thinking and communication. And what I realized as we were putting this together, and what I'm so excited to share, is how grit and social emotional learning comes into STEAM and STEM education. So as we talk about increasing academic achievements, these are some of the steps that we have taken. You'll remember that we used some of our ESSER funds to purchase Dreambox. Dreambox is a digital math platform that collects data on student performance and targets instruction. So if a student's not doing well on place value, it makes sure it gets additional reinforcement in place value. You'll remember also that we have been working for the past 2 years with a math professional developer named Dennis Sheeran to really help us target what's happening during our math lessons to make sure that all students are being taught, and it's not just the page in the book that's being taught, but it's what students need, and that all students are getting what they need. So in September, we did begin to learn about Dreambox. We also looked at our Linkit Form A results. And in November, where we really started to get better data was when we were able to review our Start Strong data. Now in January, I will present a formal presentation on Start Strong data. The opening window for being able to do that hasn't occurred yet. So even though we have the data, we are not allowed to present it publicly until the middle of the month, and then we must do that within 60 days. I'm hoping that if we wait a little bit towards the end of that 60 days, I will have the data which I really need, which is comparison data. I know how our students did. I know the areas that they need to improve on, but I am curious about how did we do. We don't even know how the state did, which we normally have that as a comparison. We don't have that data yet. So when we talk about Start Strong, one of the pieces that we really are working with our teachers on is to look specifically at a specific area where students are struggling, to look at the question that targets that skill, to identify exactly which students need instruction in that area, and then to identify what's that instruction going to look like. So we have spent a lot of time in November, and again recently with our teachers, on looking at the Start Strong data that they have on individuals and on classes, looking at the weaknesses and deciding exactly what intervention is going to look like during their win period to target those specific areas. In many ways, it is what Mr. Walsh has been talking about for many years. Find the gap and fill the gap. And that's exactly what we're really targeting right now. So, Goal 1 and Goal 2 are so intermersed because Goal 1 is kind of that product, and Goal 2 is the process. What are we doing? One of the biggest transitions we've made this year, which is aligned with guidance from the state, is we've moved away from a basic skills program, which may often put students in getting extra support as kind of a lifetime sentence, and really looked at an intervention model. Intervention models have a much more fluid entry and exit to the program based on specific need. So when our teachers looked at our Linkit Form C data and Form A, these are the areas they noticed students really needed help with. They then identified exactly which students needed help in those areas, and that formed our first intervention cycle. So you'll see the target areas for math in 3rd through 6th grade, the target areas for language arts in 1st through 6th grade. We are in the process right now of putting together our second intervention cycle, again looking at additional data and saying, what is it now that students need and what will the intervention program look like? As I said before, data doesn't just take place in math and language arts. One of the programs we were very excited to implement this year, which is the program we shared about at the Bergen County Curriculum Consortium, is Panorama. And Panorama is a digital platform that assesses students' self-concepts in social emotional areas, and that's in grades 3 through 6. It also asks teachers to comment on the observed behaviors of students in grades K through 2, and it also asks teachers to, in grades 3 through 6, to think about themselves and also to think about what they've observed. So these are 3 areas where you will notice that we scored particularly well in terms of classroom effort, self-management, and a little bit about growth mindset. I'm not still thrilled about our growth mindset score, but I think overall, nationally, that's a little bit low. And the one thing I tried to point out is sometimes we look at something that is an area of strength and we say, okay, that's good, so let's ignore it now. So in each of those areas of strength, there was sometimes a question that stood out. There was a question where students did not answer as favorably. So this concept of how hard do you try to get involved in classroom discussions, only 46% of our students said they try. In the area of in school, how possible is it for you to change how easily you give up? Only 53% of our students said they could change that. Well, that's kind of a significant issue when we're trying to develop a mindset of growth is always possible, and when we're also trying to develop grit. So the 2 areas where overall in grades 3 through 6, and these are only the results for 3 through 6, K through 2 was a little bit different. We noticed self-efficacy and grit were our 2 lowest performing areas, especially grit. Our students and their teachers actually reported the exact same response that our students reported, tend to give up pretty easily. If something's hard, they give up. And that is really going to be our #1 focus right now. It's actually part of what our next newsletter will be about. And what I got really excited about when that came out as the finding was that that's something very natural to weave into STEM education. Because the design process overall is about something's not going to work and you're going to have to try again, that you don't give up. And I think that you would agree that if we can develop one thing in our students, it's a stick-to-itness. We want them to believe that hard work pays off and that when something gets hard, it doesn't mean we quit. It just means we try it a different way. And that's so many of your teachers, our teachers in our classrooms, you often see, I'm not good at it yet. So we've kind of known for a while this is something we needed to work on. This data just supported that more. Now, Panorama is not just an assessment platform. It also provides lessons for teachers. So one of the questions you asked when we adopted Panorama was, how does this fit with existing structures? So teachers, if we're trying to improve grit, can go into the Panorama platform and they can click on lessons that they can implement during their open circles. So open circle is the structure. Panorama now gives them the content to deal with specific skills. The other program that we implemented this year is Dreambox. It took the place of IXL. We had a lot of parents that hated IXL quite a lot, said it was very frustrating, and we're getting much more positive response from both our students and our parents with regard to Dreambox. What was a little frustrating for us was that we couldn't really delve into Dreambox for a couple months because you have to have a certain number of hours in the system so it can start to inform what it really knows about a student and decide what areas that student has mastered and what areas it needs more instruction in. So this is a sample from one class. It's a 5th grade class, and each one of these rows is a student. And we can see which standards that student has mastered and which standards, and each of these is a different standard band, that student still needs to work on. What I find really interesting is when we talk all the time about what about our high-achieving students, you'll notice up top that there's no top out. So if a student is in 5th grade and they've already mastered 5th grade standards, they can begin working on the 6th grade standards. So it actually is going to help us to differentiate for all of our learners. Our teachers recently had professional development on Panorama at one of our last faculty meetings. So as we move forward with using data effectively, our next part is now, we've done this a little bit over here, and we've done this a little bit over here. What are the routines that are going to become part of our culture, that data meetings are something we do regularly as a school community? So we have allotted some of our ESSER fund money to figure out how to do that during the school day, but also after the school day. And our teachers met on Friday. For the first time, every grade level had a 90-minute data meeting. We brought in subs that we rotated through the school day and really gave them time. Because to look at data takes time. You're looking at so much, and you want to really identify not just what's the first thing, but what's the trend. Now, our next step moving forward is data. Our students need to be part of the learning process. And for students to be part of the learning process, assessment and self-assessment has to be part of what they do as well. So right now, every grade level has a behavioral skill that they're working on, and they evaluate how they're doing. In second grade, it's starting tasks independently. They found that their students this September couldn't start without asking a question, couldn't start without a teacher prompting them. So that's their behavioral skill. They've started to make learning progressions to say, this is what it looks like when I'm a beginner. I can't start at all. I can start, but I can't sustain. And a learning progression helps a student to see, what do I have to do to move to the next level? The same thing happens with our self-facing rubrics. All our teachers use rubrics to assess student writing, but in this case, we're really working on having rubrics that our students can use. So our students can see, this is what's expected, and where am I in the learning progression towards accomplishing that. Our third goal had to do with STEM, and I really didn't think we would do very much in this area, but we've already started to have some really good conversations about how to angle some of what we do with STEM in the beginning on grit. We were really excited to have our kindergarten teachers and our science lab instructor and our technology coach sit down and make a firm decision on how they're going to use some grant funds. They will be buying coding blocks. They're hands-on manipulatives that really help students to create certain. And it will be moving to first grade. They sat down, they put a really great implementation plan so that we know teachers feel supported. So it's not just one more thing on their plate, it's something that their own staff member is going to help them to move along and learn more about. And I hope that those of you with children, or those of you who have children in your neighborhood, might have heard a little bit about our STEM Day the day before Thanksgiving. We did not feel that it was in the best interest of the school community to have food parties in the classroom. We couldn't keep students 6 feet apart. So we said, okay, we don't want to just not do anything, so let's reinvent and do something different. So what we did was, we had 2 grade levels meet in the MPR. So for example, kindergarten and 5th grade, and they did a STEM activity together. So they actually made turkey catchers, and another grade made Macy's balloon floats, and that was their goal for the day. And it was less about teaching and more about watching. We wanted to get our teachers excited without feeling like, oh my gosh, you want me to do this now? And that's really what happened. That's why we chose to do it as a whole community. We planned the activity, we asked our teachers to help facilitate it, and we were really looking at how did our students attack a task, because we needed a little bit of that data. We had our family code night last night, and next week will be Hour of Code, and we will be continuing to look specifically at grade level activities, and how can we, as an administrative team, help our teachers start to incorporate things at each grade level. So that is all for me, unless you have any questions. I will say, I know this was a lot of information at one time, and if there is a specific area that you would like to know more about moving forward, we can always delve deeper into one of those at a future presentation.
Mrs. Levy?
I have a question and a comment. I will say that STEM Day before Thanksgiving, not only my children, but all of the kids came running out talking about it. The fact that the older kids were paired with the younger kids, I thought that was a brilliant idea, and the kids really enjoyed it well. So kudos to whosever idea that was great. I have a question on goal number 2 about the data, which is the Dreambox data. Is this information going to be shared similarly like, I know it somewhat matches our report cards, but can this information be shared with parents, like where they are in the Dreambox, or is it all just gonna show up on the report card? Or does it correlate like one-to-one, I guess?
It doesn't have a parent portal. It's one area that a teacher will utilize when filling out the report card, which is one of the
Okay.
reasons we like it. So it's not just, how did you do on that one Go Math assessment?
Okay.
But this is an extra piece that falls in there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Griffin?
Is there a staff member that's specifically in charge of the STEM effort, or how is it being led?
Right now, it's actually, we happen to have a kindergarten teacher who has a master's in STEM education. So it's part of why we started in kindergarten, but our science lab instructor, that is also her background. So we said we would start it in that kindergarten class, and then it may spread to the science lab class. Our tech coach has also said she will go in when teachers are doing different activities, specifically with those blocks, because there's a tech component to them.
On the Panorama data, is it possible to cross-reference like the GRIT score with like Linkit data to see if the sections on Linkit are affected by GRIT, or if there's any kind of correlation?
It's actually an interesting question. Linkit's wonderful about allowing us to add data to the platform. And when something's in the Linkit platform, we can kind of connect two variables or two assessments. So I will reach out to them and see if there's any kind of export from Panorama that will allow that. It'd actually be really smart for the two companies to link up, because that would be really fascinating.
Can you tell us what grit and STEM are?
Sure. So grit is, do you give up? So when something's hard, do you keep at it, even if you fail the first time? Okay? I always say that competitive athletes have a lot of grit. Something's hard, they fail, they lose, they keep going. Okay? Our students struggle in that area. They say, it's hard, I give up, I'm done. Okay? STEM has to do with science, technology, engineering, and math. So some people get confused, and in Oradell, I say they think it's about creating the next Indrani Das, who is an OPS graduate who went on to win the Regeneron Award. STEM is not just about science and technology. It's about the development of 21st century skills. So it's about putting kids together to solve problems, and sometimes those problems might involve technology, but it's also about teaching them a process for how to approach problems. And that's the same process that scientists and engineers use all the time. So what you'll most often hear is the term the design process when you're talking about STEM education.
Thanks.
In Dreambox, I know that's fairly new this year. It is new this year, correct? How is it fitting into the rest of the math curriculum at this point?
Well, it's actually given us a much-needed resource, because remember, all of our teachers have a win period, a what I need period, right? So what Dreambox is allowing is sometimes that's the perfect thing for students to do independently during the what I need period to be reinforced on a specific skill, while the teacher's working with a small group of students. So it's being used for homework. It's being used primarily, though, in the win period, because win, just like intervention, shouldn't just be about what's happening right at that moment. It has to be about that math learner overall, and what does that math learner need. So just because you're in fractions, this kid may master fractions, maybe he needs reinforcement in geometry. So Dreambox is allowing us to make sure that we're continuing to cycle through all the standards.
So in this, with Dreambox, when certain kids are on that platform, maybe other kids are not.
Correct. Yeah. Think of it as centers. So if you had centers in your classroom, Dreambox might be one of those centers.
Right, thank you.
Commend you guys on all the efforts you've done on the STEM integration already, but I'm wondering, going forward, is there a thought process to maybe create a cross-functional team that would include arts also? I know that some schools include arts in it too, so didn't know what the thought was here.
And that's why when we originally wrote the goal, I wrote STEM and STEAM, because I'm not really sure where our aspect is. I could definitely see that Mrs. Schlesinger will be interested in being involved, so I could see us taking more of a STEAM perspective over time. I think right now we're just looking to get started and really starting to look also at, we've looked at some professional development that Montclair State can help us with, and really seeing what are some of the other programs that schools in the area are utilizing.
So just a quick clarification, Drew, because, my kids grew up with the IXL, so it kind of serves in that practice, reinforcement, all of that. But you mentioned that it gives the opportunity, if they've mastered something, that they can go ahead and work on some more skills. And I'm sitting here, processing this as you're saying it, and I think that's wonderful. Is that now my kids are older, and I see at their various grades, the students are at many different levels of math, and some need more and some need more practice. And I think that's wonderful that it gives them the opportunity. I've always, been a fan of leveled math at younger grades, and I think this is going to be great for serving all of the needs, right? So I like that. The other thing, like with the pandemic, how we've had to reinvent a million things. This day before Thanksgiving, as my kids came through here, we brought in all the food, right? And as things went on, had to deal with all of the allergies. And it can be very stressful as the class parent and as the parent of an allergy child. And so this sounds like what you did was a really wonderful reinvention of, creating a new tradition at school. And my kids always loved the big kid, little kid thing. So I think it sounds like you guys did a great job with that. It's really nice. That's
Actually, in terms of the differentiation with Dreambox, one of the things that's fascinating about it is in IXL, your child only had access to that grade level. We had to kind of wheel and deal to get them another grade level, buy another subscription, whatever. Dreambox doesn't just give the child, it knows how old the child is, and it makes the interface grade level appropriate. So even if a sixth grader is working on a second grade skill set, it doesn't make the screen look like a second grader's screen. And I actually think that is one of the most exciting parts about it. So anyone could be using it in the classroom, and no one knows who's working at what level. It makes you think about, like, when we match kids to text, and the kid who's reading the lower level text doesn't want to open that book. Dreambox took that away from being an issue.
Anything else in your report?
That's it for me.
All right. Business Administrator's report.
No report tonight.
Okay. We have the review of the November 10th minutes. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Marmora. We have approval of October 27th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of October 27th.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes?
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker, Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, moving on to committee reports under administrative, we have a small change in the calendar. Is that the graduation date? So graduation is changing from Tuesday to Wednesday. That's the only change in the calendar. So, Mr. Walsh, would you like to present the administrative item?
I move that we approve A1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, buildings and grounds, Mr. Darian's on here. Mrs. Shapiro, you want to take that?
Sure. I think I'd like to make a motion to approve item B1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Norian?
I have nothing to report at this time. I understand a report was made at the last meeting about our prior meeting, but we have some things to address. I'm not sure if we need the meeting before January or whether we should go into January looking for our next meeting to have those other curriculum up to. So you'll have to fill me in. This is Ms. Bozio's.
Finance, Mrs. Shapiro?
So Finance met a couple of weeks ago, nothing really to report on that. Minutes were in the packet. And before I make a motion, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight, we had 2 donations from the community, one for a whiteboard easel and another from a community member, and also voice amplifiers and microphones, which I bet are fantastic in the classroom, especially with the masks on. I'm sure it's delightful for the teachers and for the students who are trying to listen. So that sounds like a great purchase, a great donation for the school. I think that's all I have for here. I'd like to make a motion to approve items D1 through D12.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I had a meeting 2 Saturdays ago for the delegates assembly. There was nothing to vote on. A couple of committees made reports, and if anybody's interested, I'll try to get the reports that were made. But that's all that happened.
Thank you. Personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, thank you. We had a meeting this evening, and those minutes will be in your next packet. I would like to present F1 and 2, but prior to that, on your personnel insert sheet, referencing 1C.
2C.
2C,
Yeah.
2C, I'm sorry. That to be determined will be changed to $35 per hour.
I'll second personnel.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, I do have some questions about the contract. Is this something we would talk about here, or would we talk about it in closed session?
We can go into closed session right now if you want.
Okay.
Yep. So would you like to make the motion?
There's a motion on the floor. Should we wait for the motion on the floor?
Do we have to wait for the motion on the floor? Like, what do we do? We already, yeah, you have to make a motion to go in. That's already been moved, so you have to make go ahead, make a motion to.
All right, so a motion for executive session to review the contract with the Board of Education and Oradell Association Administrators.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. We have to take a vote, right? Just all in favor? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, going into closed session. Okay, someone want to make a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Catherine? Seconded by Mr. Walsh. Okay, so Mrs. Walker, why don't you do your resolution again? Make your motion again.
Okay, I'd like to present, what is this? F1? F1
And 2.
and 2, but I would like to change on 2C to be determined to $35 an hour.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Policy, Mrs. Levy.
No report.
Public relations, Mr. Griffin.
So we have a meeting planned for, I think, we're trying to plan a meeting for next week on public relations. There is a brochure that we have a draft of that the committee will be reviewing. I need to schedule the date of that, but likely it will be next week, and I'll let you know.
And the newsletter went out.
And the newsletter went out. Congratulations. That's good.
COVID task force.
Yeah, we had a meeting today, reviewed current district data, talked about any changes that might be coming for quarantining based on risk levels as that changes, and looking at any ways that we can do to ensure that kids are safe and also in school as often as possible.
Can I say it here? Also, Ms. Bosey is going to be putting a graph on the website, right? That anyone can check at any time?
Yeah, then that draft looks great too. So that will be there'll be more information that comes out to folks with it, those detailed data points going forward.
Open to the public, please raise your digital hand if you're joining us on Zoom. Okay, moving forward, any old or new business? Mr. Griffin?
I didn't comment earlier, but I just wanted to congratulate Robin on the amazing time you've had here. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I just from day one you've come in as the board member dedicated to making this school better and ensuring that all policies and actions of this board are focused on the kids, and it means a lot. The plaque is only the smallest of little offerings for what you have done, and I just wanted to make sure I said thank you personally, so thank you.
Mrs. Norian?
I'd also like to thank Robin for her time on the board. I think I've said this before, that I can honestly say I don't think a board member has entered the board with as much passion as Robin, and it's kept us on our toes. And I thank you for all that you've contributed to the community of Oradell and to our children.
Mrs. Walker?
Just to say thank you, Robin, for all you've done, and your passion and dedication is certainly so admirable, and I'm sure we're going to see more of you.
Any other old or new business? Mrs. Levy?
So, because I am the sixth grade chair now and working on graduation, I wanted to alert all of the board members of an amazing opportunity. The PTA is selling tickets to a Mets game on May 1st. And because we have awesome PTA, if they sell 280 tickets, the sixth grade will be singing the national anthem on the field. And if they sell 500 tickets, somebody will get to throw out the first pitch. We're also, I use the universal we, but there is a PTA board member that is definitely doing the charge. I won't use her name publicly because I don't want her to be, but is also working the potential of having maybe the Panther on the field with Mr. and Mrs. Met. So lots of opportunities if we sell the tickets. So if you are a Met fan or a baseball fan, May 1st, and you can go to the PTA website to do that. And I believe Mr. Busher has graciously agreed to make sure if we sell the 280 tickets that our kids would be prepared to sing the national anthem. So we'll thank him too. So I think it's just, they're coming up with new and inventive ways for the kids to have an opportunity to do special things because they miss so much, and it's definitely appreciated. And then I just wanted to say that it has been a pleasure to serve the Oradell community, and I thank everybody. And I also encourage everybody in the community to not just give your voice and concerns to each other, but to attend board meetings and make sure your voices are heard. And thank you. That's it.
Any other old or new business? So if someone would make a motion for a closed session regarding personnel and student issues,
So moved.
I'll second it.
going into closed session at 8:33, we will not be taking any action afterwards.